Do you want to start learning Python? Do you not know where to start? In today's video, I'm going to explain the basics and how you would become better at Python, and from here you can expand on your knowledge to learn more advanced and more intermediate skills. So the first thing we want to do is Python, you're going to go to replit.com. So replit.com. Now, usually when you become a programmer, when you actually do code, you're going to use an IDE, an integrated development environment. And this is basically a place where you write all your code. It has a terminal, it is going to have a lot of features for writing code, and it's basically going to make your life of writing code much easier. Like you can go right here, like write this in like Notepad or something. Uh, this in like Notes. I can open this up in Notes and I can write like a whole uh, Python program in there, but I'm not going to do that because that's really difficult. If you put a bug, if we have a syntax error, you're not going to know, and when you run it in your terminal, it's not going to make any sense. Therefore, people use these things called IDEs, which make your coding, use IDEs to make your coding experience much easier. I use Visual Studio Code, but installing an IDE, getting it set up with all the correct languages can be a bit complicated. So we're just going to start off with Replit.com. Replit.com is a free website. It's kind of a really basic IDE. Now, when you want to do advanced things, it's not going to work very well. But for the more basic things, it's going to be incredibly easy and really, really simple. So you should be the page here. If not, you have to like create an account. That should be pretty straightforward. Once you've created an account, it should show you a page, something similar to this. You should be on the home page. There are different pages like templates, my replits. See, I made quite a lot of repls because I've been using this for like 3 years. And so, yeah, you probably just get pretty empty there. But your homepage should be relatively similar to mine. You're gonna go hit create, and you're gonna go here and you're gonna select Python. So if it's not here, because I already have these selected as my favorites, just Python. And you can go Python 3.10. Like there's different types, but it doesn't matter right now. We're just using regular Python. So you're gonna go Python, and you can name this whatever you want. I'm gonna name it Python Touch YouTube, whatever. And we're gonna hit create REPL. And it should take a few seconds because it's gonna need to boot REPL. This is all stored on the cloud. It's gonna take a while, but there we go. It's loaded up. So now we have REPL. Now let me give you a bit of a tour. This is your console. Whenever you write code, your code is all going to be exported here to the console. And you have a shell here. This is a bit complicated, but if you have multiple files, you want to run them, you want to like bash scripts or whatever, you all run them through here. But you're not going to worry about this for now. We're just going to use this. This is where you actually write your code. So you see right here, you write code and stuff. And these two packages, this is a bit advanced topic, but you don't really need to worry about these. But what these do is these are kind of what make everything work. Now you should be changing these because then your program wouldn't really work. But these are all like the basic frameworks and things Replit has put in to make sure your code is going to work properly. On this bar, uh, just don't worry about any of these. These are the packages you install. These might be empty for you. These might not. I'm not sure. These are like you can stuff like environment keys, all that good stuff. Basically, I can make like new files here, like new Python files if I wanted to. Whatever. If you need to make a program that has multiple files that work together, you can do this. You can add folders too, but we're not going to worry about that. So let's move on to the actual code. The first thing you do in a Python program, or I guess any program, it's kind of a meme in the coding community, is you always print the words hello world to your console right here. I don't know who came up with this, I don't know why it's a thing, but it just is. So as a programmer, you are, I guess, obliged to do that. So there's different ways to print different programs. There's different ways. Sorry, there's different ways to print in different coding languages. It's like C, right? You go like console.log, and then you put whatever you need to put in there. But Python is like probably one of the easier things in terms of syntax. The syntax is very similar to English. So basically, in Python, in order to print some words, so basically whatever I put in the thing is gonna get printed here. So then I go print, then I go parentheses. Now you don't have to put in the second parenthesis. You put in one parenthesis, the second one will already pop up automatically. Make sure the P is lowercase, by the way. Python is case sensitive, which means that your uppercase and your lowercase do matter. Then you can put double quotes or you can put single quotes. They both work in Python, but it's better practice to use double quotes because most languages, double quotes are the only acceptable type of quotation marks, not single quotes. And once again, same thing with the parentheses, you hit it just once and both of them are there. And now you can type anything and it gets typed inside. So I type hello, I put space, world, or whatever you want in here. Now, whatever you put in these quotation marks is going to get printed here. Now, this is all. Usually in other languages, you need to put like semicolons, brackets and stuff. Python is really simple. You don't need to do any of this. It's just print hello world. Then you just click run. This is gonna do whatever it's written here. It's gonna print there. So I run, and it prints hello world in my console. Great. Now let's talk about variables. So if you have done algebra, or I guess pre-algebra too, you know that what the concept of variables. Variables are basically just letters that not necessarily letters. They're just kind of values that hold other values, but their values aren't always literally shown. They could be unknown, they can be known, but they're just not shown there. So kind of, for example, x equals 3, right? Now, if I write an equation, right, x plus y, x plus 4, right? What is x plus 4 equals question mark, right? So what is x plus 4? Now, if I didn't tell you this, if I didn't tell you x equals 3, you wouldn't know how to solve this equation, okay? You wouldn't know how to solve, unless, of course, now, x plus 4 equals question mark, you cannot solve this equation, okay? But if I do x equals 3, then what you do is because x and 3 are the same thing, you can just substitute x with 3 and get 3 plus 4 equals 7. And right there, you've just solved your mathematical equation. So same thing in Python. If I do x equals 3, anytime I reference the variable x, it's going to store the variable x as 3, so that anytime I use the variable x again, like if I go print x, every time I reference this variable of x, it's just going to replace it with whatever value I set it to. So I do this, it's going to print 3. So that's a straightforward concept of how variables work, but let's talk about the different types of variables. Now, variables, there are many different types of variables. The really basic ones are strings, integers, floats, and booleans, okay? So a string, or str, so you can write string or str. Str is usually the universal abbreviation. So you go str equal, and then an str, or a string, is basically just it's a set of characters, a set of letters. Now, str equals 1, that's not a string. A string is anything in quotation marks, like hello world. Remember, we did this in a print statement. We printed a string. This right here is what we do to print a string. So right here, you have str equals hello world, and this right here is a string. Then the second type of variable is an integer. An integer is just a positive or a negative number with no decimal points. So int equals 6 or int equals -6, whatever. Then you have a float. A float is a positive or negative number with decimal points. So -6.324, whatever. Yeah. And then you have booleans. Now booleans are really, really simple. Booleans are the simplest one of all of them. Booleans are literally like a true or false function. They're either equal to true or they're either equal to false. In this situation, you can write true. They can also be false. And that at the base is how you write all the different types of variables. So these are variables. Now you don't have to, so other languages, if I need to make a variable called a that equals hello world, this would be incorrect syntax, because in other languages you have to write str. Yeah, you have to write that, so you have to tell them what kind of variable it is, and this is a string because it's in quotation marks. So you'd have to, in other languages, you'd have to represent this as a string, but because this is Python, as you can see, it's giving me like red underline, which just means incorrect syntax. You don't actually have to write string. You don't have to represent. You don't have to tell the computer what kind of variable it is. It'll figure it out on its own. So you can just delete that. And a equals hello world, and that's correct syntax. So that is a string right there. Now, if I were to go b equals -6, that's an integer. I don't have to go int 6 equals int b equals -6. I can just write b equals -6. And same thing, if I write c equals -6.324, I don't have to specify this is a float. I can just write c equals -6.324. The computer is gonna know what I'm talking about. Same thing here, d equals false. You don't have to specify. So that really simple introduction to variables. Now let's talk about how you would use variables. So let's say we have to print. So, oh, by the way, just a little side note. You put hashtag, you put anything here. This is known as a comment, right? You put hashtag and anything else, the computer ignores it. That's just like if you need to like write a bit of notes to yourself as to like what the code does. Because then you have like hundreds of lines of code, you're gonna forget what all of that does in 2 weeks. Which is why you're gonna need to write like notes to yourself. For example, this part splits a string or whatever. So we can just start like using comments now. It's good practice to use comments, especially when you go to like work in like when you actually work as a programmer. Someone else has to come and maintain your code, and there's no comments. No one's gonna know what's going on. But a little tip: if you want to work at a coding job and you never want to get fired, never write comments because they can't replace you. Because then no one's gonna know what the code does. You don't hear that from me. So the first thing we're gonna write is the first part of our thing. Okay, sorry, let's erase all that. Our program is going to print the answer to 24 minus 6. Okay? How do we do that? Now, mainly there are two different ways you can do this. Now, the easier way that doesn't use variables is to literally just do this. You print that, it's going to give you 18. You're just going to print 18. Or, putting it into more complicated programs, it's not going to be 24 minus 6. It's going to be the input of this, subtracted by this, concatenated by this, split by this, repeated by this. It's too much stuff to fit in like one single set of parentheses. So then you start using variables. You're going to have variables for different parts. That's just going to be a times b minus c, whatever. So here you just go ans. Oh, sorry. This should be the next line. Ans, which is like a bit of a short form of answer, equals 24 minus 6. And we can print ans. Now, the way this works, right, is doing this represents in comments. So we're going to write ans equals 24 minus 6. So the computer is going to simplify whatever's on this side. It's going to go ans equals 18, because it simplifies that. 24 minus 6 is 18. Then it stores that. So kind of like the computer has like memory, right? Think about it like I don't know, like a parking lot, right? There's a finite amount of parking spaces in this parking lot. Each of these parking spaces can have one car, or in this case, one variable, right? So the computer needs to store this in memory so that it knows. Now, if I were to just go 24 minus 6 and then print ands, I'm not going to get anything because I never store anything. Right? This is not incorrect syntax. Oh, it is. Oh, yeah, sorry, this part is incorrect syntax. This right here, this is not like code. This is not incorrect syntax. Just nothing happens because it did this. It found out 18. So it did this right, and it simplified this to 18, and then it goes, okay, we have 18. I didn't set this as a variable, so I didn't store it anywhere, right? So that's the thing with these. If you don't if you don't set it as a variable, it's not going to store it, and the computer's like never going to remember what you just put there. So as right now, it simplifies ants equals 18, and then you put ants, and then just re-references to whatever it's stored in memory, which is 18, and then it just prints 18. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on to, I guess let's look over this a bit more. So we just use that, right? Now, let's move on to a very simple concatenation, right? So, let's say you have name equals Matthew, and then what is going on? Okay, name equals Matthew. Sorry, first name equals Matthew, and last name equals, so his last name is like Sanders, right? Now our program has these two, right? And our program has to print this full name. Now a full name is literally just a first name and then a last name. So we're gonna go here. We're gonna go full name equals first name plus last name, right? Because it's with a full name, it's just a first name plus a last name. And then if I were to go print full name, you'd see that it does print both the names. It forgets the space. And because it's not that I forgot the space, I literally just went this plus this. So this, well, once again, because this substitutes, right? So first name substitutes with Matthew, last name substitutes with Sanders. So basically, full name. So basically, full name equals just that way. It substituted this to Matthew plus Sanders, and then it just joined the strings together. And because the computer isn't going to know whether you want a space there or not, so it just joined the strings together. It started off with these characters, and then added these characters at the end, right? It literally just connected these two strings together, and therefore we didn't have a space. Now, in order to get a space, what we can do, not bad, but in order to get a space, what we can do is we can just literally just add a space. So we can go that, put a space, and plus. That's Matthew plus space plus Sanders, which if you run that is going to give you the space. That's concatenation. Concatenation is just adding two strings together. It's very simple. Now let's move on to not really much we can do for booleans. I guess for floats. I'll just show you how a float works. So I'd go. Let's go. Float equals 3.24. Okay. I should also just go float equals 0.0, right? And I go print float. It's gonna print 0.0, right? Even if I put like 15 zeros at the end, it's gonna print 0.0 because this one, okay, so the computer, okay, this has decimal points, so obviously it's a number with decimal points. It's a float. Then when this thing has 15 zeros, it doesn't matter that it has 15 zeros or just two. It doesn't matter. So then it just made this like this. And the reason it didn't just give me zero, because 0.0 and zero are the same thing. The reason it gave me zero and not 0.0 is the reason is actually quite simple. It's because it's a float, right? If it printed zero, that would mean it's an integer. But the computer isn't looking for the extra layer because that's just taking up more memory. So the computer is just gonna say, okay, decimal point equals float, and then it prints that. Very simple. Now a little bit of a fun fact, I guess. So if you So you divide something by, so 10 divided by 4, the answer is 2.5, right? So if I were to print the answer, it would turn it as 2.5. That's a float, right? If I go 10 divided by 2, which is 5, right? 5 is a whole number. So you would think it would just print ants as 5 and not 5.0 because it's a whole number. I never specified it had to be a float, right? So if I run, it actually prints as 5.0 because anytime Python does a divide or a division operator, it automatically turns the answer into a float because Python isn't checking whether it's a whole number or not. It's just automatically turning it into a float. Let's talk about typecasting, okay? So ants equals 4, right? 4 is an integer. Let's say I feel like turning this into a float. It's like I could technically go here, go to this line, and hit 0.0. Could do that, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go ants equals float parentheses ants. Now, as of right now, the type of ants is an integer. As of now, I'm turning it into a float. So if I print ants right now, and then I go ahead and I print, ants here, I'm gonna get two values. First one's gonna be 4, and it's gonna be 4.0 because the first one was printed when ants was an integer. Keep in mind, all the lines go top to bottom in chronological order. So you have ants 4 is the integer. So then I print it and check the type, and this is the integer because of decimal points. I printed 4, and then they went ants equals float ants, and then I went, oh, this is a float now. It has decimal points. And then when I printed it again, ants is now a float. It has decimal points. I printed it as a decimal point. And then that's typecasting. Now, I can do like ants is 10 times 2. And then again, I would get 20 and then 20.0 because it doesn't matter what the number is. I turn it from ants into a float. Now, what if I turn this into a string? Oh, sorry, str, not strng. So if this into a string, which is remember just str, I hit run, it's going to print the same thing. Now, those might look like the same thing, but they're not. One of them is 20, the other is that. Now we can find this out by literally just doing this, right? Now we go here, right? With this value of ants, right? I go ants, so I go print ants times 2. It's gonna give me 40, right? Because 20 times 2 is 40. However, if I then go here, and then I go print, if I go print ants times 2, it's gonna give me that. It's gonna be 2020. That's because it printed the string 20 2 times consecutively. Because that's not a number. If I were to go, same thing, if I were to set ants to like, because a string, right? That's a string. If I send to another string, like, I don't know, hello world, they're going to print hello world twice because they're both strings. It's going to treat this and then this the same way because they're both strings. They're technically both in quotation marks. So that's that. And now we're going to move on to, I think conditionals are a bit complicated, so let's move on to input, right? Now let's say I need to I need to make a full name like we were doing earlier, right? Of course, the full name is going to be first name plus last name. But let's say the user's name isn't Matthew Sanders. Let's say their name is Bob Smith, right? Now you don't know the username. There could be one guy called Bob Smith using it. There could be a guy called Matthew Sanders using it. There could be a person called Brian Watson using it. You don't know that, right? So now let's just ask the user what their name is, and therefore the full name will work for everybody. So then we're gonna go. So first thing, we have to store the user's name somehow. So the user's first name is gonna be equal to first underscore name. I don't know why it's doing this. Then we're gonna go input. So remember, it's like this, right? So that's input, parentheses. And in these quotation marks, you're gonna enter what you ask the user. And then you're gonna do this, and then you do that, and it's empty, right? Now, as right now, if I put in, let me just do this. Hold up. Print first underscore name, right? I just do that. Now I do that, and I run it, and let's say I just put in something like Rasta. This is random set of letters I just put in. You do that, it's just gonna print whatever I put in, right? Now, I have no idea what the computer was asking me for, and to be honest, you probably couldn't even tell that it was asking for an input. How do I know what the computer is trying to ask me? Well, so here in parentheses, I'd go enter your first name. And now what you want to do, now usually, just for the, I'll just show you this here, telling you. You go here, enter your first name. Put in my first name, right? My first name is like, I don't know, Matthew, right? See how there's literally zero spacing between the E in name and the N in Matthew? That's why here, it's just kind of common courtesy to put a colon and then a space after a question. So whenever this is your actual prompt, and it's still inside the quotation marks, you're going to put a colon and a space. So let's look at this versus this. This is much prettier because you can, now when I enter, and then I can't backspace and go back. This is the furthest I can go. Then I go Matthew Sanders. I enter my name. Actually, my first name, sorry, just Matthew. And then it prints it back. So that's much more pretty because there's actual colon and a space. I know where the prompt ends, and there's space for me to enter my name. Right? Now we're gonna do the same thing here. So then last underscore name, should get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. Equals input. Then in the prompt, we're gonna go enter your last name. Space. And right here, you can enter your name, your last name. So now we have two variables. One is the user's first name, and one is the user's last name. We know this is their actual name because we asked them, and they entered it in. So now we can once again go full name equals first underscore name plus last underscore name. Right there. You just use concatenation to give the user a full name. Now, of course, we're still going to have to add the space, so you can do this. Right there. You now have the user's full name. You print it. So you go print full name. For variables, you don't need to put like a string or anything. So you don't need to put quotation marks or strings. Everything else, like integers, floats, and even like variables, you don't need to put any quotation marks. So strings, remember, are put in quotation marks. You can also put 2 as the prompt, and then we do that. It just puts 2, but like, just 2 isn't very descriptive, so you put a string explaining what the actual prompt is, because you can only get so much descriptive with an integer value. So you print the full name, and then you hit run, and then what's your first name? I'd go Matthew. Last name, Sanders. No, Matthew Sanders. Now, let's say just to add a bit more, I guess, user-friendly feature to this, you can go and add your full name is, and then make sure you close this. It's not going to automatically do that. Make sure there's a space there. You can, if you have like a line here, you don't need to add a separate space. You can just put a space in the first prompt. Your full name is that. And then once again, you can just go plus, and then add a second prompt. So I put a period there. So I go enter your first name, Matthew. Enter your last name, Sanders. Your full name is Matthew Sanders. See, that's so now you're already a pro at input statements. Input statements are pretty easy. So now let's move on to conditional statements. Conditional statements are kind of one step ahead, but they're still really easy. So a conditional statement is basically you're checking if something is what you want it to be. So let's say we want to know, okay, so let's say we want to give, if this person is Emma Watson, we want to give them VIP access. Okay, but how would we know that this person is really Emma Watson? We have no way of knowing whether the name they entered in was Matthew Sanders, Emma Watson, or some completely different name. How do you check to see if the full name is Emma Watson? Well, you'd go and you'd say if full underscore name equals equals. You put equals for setting a variable and then two equals to check that same variable. So if I put two equals, it's is this equal? Right? So if full name is equal to, and then put in a string, put Emma Watson, then we're gonna print you have VIP access. Now what if this person isn't Emma Watson? What if they're Matthew Sanders? Then we're gonna go else. And here you can do two things. You can put pass. Pass just means do nothing. Or you could just, if you want to be a bit mean, you can say print you do not have VIP access. You notice that they can cry themselves to sleep. And then you print that. You start. Now you go Emma Watson. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. My bad. Go Emma Watson. Your full name is Emma Watson. You have VIP access. Emma. Listen, my last name isn't Watson. It's like McLogan or something. Emma McLogan. Your full name is Emma McLogan. You do not have VIP access. Now let's say we want to give not just Emma Watson, but also, let's say you want to give VIP access to another famous person, Taylor Swift. I don't know. So then you're just gonna go put that in parentheses, and then you can put comma after the quotation mark, and then go what's the word in Taylor Swift, right? That's kind of like or. You can also do if full name equals Emma Watson, or if full name equals Taylor Swift. But you just do this. You go run Taylor Swift. Oh, never mind. Sorry. That's just my error on my part there. That doesn't make any sense. Hold up. So or full name equals. No, that only works in like certain situations that use more advanced functions. But you know, whatever. That's my bad. Taylor Swift. Oh, not Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift. Yeah, so there you go. Right. Right there. You're giving this person VIP access. So that's just very simple if conditional statements. Now keep in mind that Python, everything is determined by indentation. So you put this. So you see how this is like a bit, it's a bit more indented than this. There's like a line here, right? That line kind of represents this is. If I had another tab, if I had tab once again, there's two lines. The first one's kind of hard to see, but there's a line right there if you look really closely. So this means that if I write this is giving me an error because then it's like if I do this, it gives me an error because this happens, right? And then it's like if this is true, then this will happen. But this isn't indented in a way that it's part of the thing. This is kind of like it's not really like think about like superior. This is supposed to be inferior to this because it has more indentation. This is because if this happens, then you go one step down in indentation of this because this is superior. It's the parent function. This is the child function. And same way with the else. The else is on the same level as this, but this is supposed to be inferior. It's supposed to be a child of this because you need to make this happen when this situation is true. So make sure the indentation is correct. Python is all about indentation. I cannot tell you the amount of times I messed up a simple indentation And I've been sitting on my computer for hours just wondering what I did wrong in my code. You know, it happens to the best of us. And this Python is like the Python's indentations are basically it's semicolons. Any other language, you're gonna mess up on semicolons because it's just a dumb thing that you can forget sometimes. I know myself, I've forgotten semicolons in other languages multiple times. The Python is more simple, but you can still mess up. So make sure you don't do any dumb mistakes. Make sure you're keeping a very good eye on whatever you're doing, just to be sure. Now let's talk about functions. Okay, it's probably might be a bit complicated, but let's talk about functions. Okay, so a function, you always define a function. Okay, let's first explain what a function is. Sorry, a function is basically a set of a set of lines of code. It's a set of code that only happens when you tell it to happen. For example, if I say print hello world, right? This is gonna happen regardless of whether I want it to or not, right? And what if I want this to print only sometimes? I only want this to happen when I want it to happen. I only want it to happen when I tell it to happen. So then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go there, delete that. Then I'm gonna define a function. A function is basically I'm gonna put this code into that function, and then when I call the function, it's gonna execute whatever's inside. That means that whatever code I have written is only gonna happen when I want it to happen. So I go let's go def. Let's call the function whatever we want. So like print underscore statement. Right? That's the name of the function. Then you put parentheses, and then you put colon, right? Now in the parentheses, you put whatever parameters you want to pass. That is a bit complicated, but I'll explain that in a second. Okay, so you're gonna go back here. You're gonna go there. You're gonna hit enter, right? And the thing is a bit weird for me. Like my first line is really scuffed, but here you're just gonna have. So what's gonna happen when you run this function? Whatever you want, whatever code is gonna happen when you run the function, that's what you want to print. So we're gonna go print hello world. Now, if I run the program, literally nothing happens. It's not printing this because I haven't called the function yet. Now, when I want this to happen, I'll go, okay, then I'll go print underscore statement, and I'll put parentheses, right? I've just called the function. This is like the same thing that I wrote there. Run, and that should do something, but it's not. Hold on 1 second. Uh, that's not a code issue. That's just the program isn't working the way it's supposed to. Yeah, my Wi-Fi just went out. That makes sense. Okay, we're gonna run, and it prints hello world. And so if I like comment that out, that's not gonna happen, right? So instead of like this is really simple. You can write hello world literally anywhere, right? But the end of this print statement, it has like 57 lines of code that I need to execute at different times. Let's say I have a user authentication that needs to happen at certain points in my code, but the user authentication is 57 lines long. I'm not going to write those 57 lines over and over and over and over and again because us programmers are really lazy. So what we're going to do, I'll just put all 57 lines of code in a function, and then whenever I need to use those 57 lines of code, I'll just call this function and it'll execute whatever code is inside the function. That's really simple. Let's talk about parameters, right? Now, parameters are whatever I put here in this parentheses. These are whatever variables I call. And basically, if I have a variable that's defined like down here, right? If I define ants equals like it's just 6, right? If I already defined this, I can't go print ants because that variable literally hasn't even been defined yet, right? This variable has not been defined yet, which is why I'm gonna have to just let's say I need to use this variable, however, right? So I'll just go var. Now, keep in mind that this and this do not have to be named the same thing. As long as, if I need to use this and this, I do not have to name them the same thing. As long as when I put this in, it's named this, it'll just take the place. I'll go var and then var2. So I just passed in two variables. Okay? So let's go here. So here, instead of putting ands, I'll put var. And then I'll print var2. Then I have ands. Then I have ands2 equals 8, right? Now, let's put this is var1. Yeah, so I have var1, var2, ands1, ands2. Now, what this is, right? Now I want to print ands1 and ands2 when I call this function. But how? I can't just write ands1 and ands2. These variables don't exist yet. What I'm gonna do, however, I'm gonna just pass in ands1 and ands2 into this function call. These are called parameters or arguments. Basically, what these do is, so as you can see, this variable, it's var1, var2. Here it's ands1, ands2. What this does is ands1 just replaces var1. The way it works is this define function, right? Var1. So ands1 gets replaced with 6, right? So then it goes here, and var1 gets replaced with ands1, which gets replaced with 6. So this is 6, right? Then, so in this case, var1 equals 6, because var1 equals ands1, and ands1 equals 6. So here we're going to print, when we print var1, it's going to go, oh, var1 is equal to 6. So then it's going to print 6. Same thing for ands2, right? Ands2 here. So we're going to var2. What is var2? Well, var2 is ands2. What is ands2? It's 8. So var2 is 8. When I print var2, it's going to print 8. So when I run this, we get 6 and 8, because that's what it just printed. Now when I print in, like, if I were to put in, like, ands3 or, like, ands8, those variables don't exist. When I do, I'm getting an error, because those variables literally do not exist. So that's right there. That right there is a really simple explanation of how parameters work and how functions work in parameters. Now, there are different things like loops, but loops are like complicated, and this video is getting a bit long, so I think I'll just end this off and continue next time. Thank you for watching.